Yeah, we're heading for a hot day today. Actually, it doesn't look too hot. We're gonna go to 27 degrees up here in Toronto. It's beautiful, sunny, but it's very muggy. So when we have 27 degrees, it's real moist heat. Um, Guido, what's the weather like there in Colombia?
It's dry. It's very dry.
Sure.
Some type of summertime, hot weather, but very nice. But not in other places of the country. It's very rainy in some places. It's very rainy in some places.
Yeah, I guess when you get close to mountains and you got the sea and air and stuff. What about you, Reggie? How's the weather in
Yeah.
Mexico? You're towards the south of Mexico in the country, inland. How is it?
It's good. It's very good. A lot of sun. It's nice today.
What's the temperature like?
I don't know. It's about maybe 20,
20. Oh,
18
that's
grades.
comfortable. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, very good. It's nice. It's been
So,
raining a lot. That's why now it's a little bit cold and it's nice.
it's nice. What about you, Ian? How are things in Portland?
It's been hot
Uh,
for us. Today's probably going to get up near 100.
yeah.
I don't know how that translates.
Yeah, I know. I think you're. I mean, I don't know them in my mind, but I know them physically. I know 100 is really hot. I think that would
Yes.
be like 37 or something. I'm not sure. We went metric long ago, so I look at the Fahrenheit side of my thermometer, but to translate 100 into Celsius, I couldn't do that. Um,
Yeah.
but that's pretty
I
hot.
can't do the reverse. But yes,
Yeah,
it's very hot.
that's
Yeah,
pretty hot.
especially for Portland.
Yeah. Is it sunny and
It is
it
sunny,
is?
blue sky. It's
Yeah.
very nice. Even when it's warm, like you're hot like this, there's usually some shade and a bit of a breeze, so it's
Yeah.
not overwhelming.
What about you, Michael? How are things down in Australia?
We're in winter, so it's probably about 8 degrees right now.
That sounds wonderful. I just took the dog for a walk and I felt like melting out there. Um, so anyone have anything they want to bring up? Any questions they want to ask? I mean, today I want to talk about a bit of the cosmology and where the cosmology fits the psychology. But I thought any questions? How's the inner work going? Are we doing exercises? The 12 joint exercise, sources of divine rejoicings? Or are we doing the 10 bone illumination exercise or the 60 bone exercise for the hands and fingers? Or the breathing, the collected state?
Well, I've been using that recording that you sent us, the collection,
Yeah.
And I notice when I finish it, I feel very collected, relaxed in the body. My voice feels a little deeper, like my throat's a little more relaxed, but it doesn't tend to stick around that long.
Yeah.
So not really a question there, and it's only been 7 days, so I'm not,
Well,
I'm
in a sense, what we're doing is he says that we are creating certain emanations, and we want those emanations to settle within us. So, and Mr. Gurdjieff said, you do your exercise and then you try to maintain the collected state for 10 or 15 minutes to allow the emanations to settle. Iman, you're on Zoom. Wow, hi.
Because I'm in
yeah. Oh,
Switzerland.
yeah.
Because I'm in Switzerland.
You're in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Ah,
All right.
okay. You got so you're at one of your conferences in Switzerland?
Yeah.
Oh. How long are you there for?
I came on the 11th, and I'm staying till the 22nd.
22nd. And it's one of the peace conferences, whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a conference called Towards Inclusive Peace.
How many participants?
Oh, over 100, around 140.
Are they from all around the world?
Around the world.
Wow.
The whole world, we have it here.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've been to Switzerland to do this a couple of times, right?
Yeah, this is my fourth time.
Your fourth time. Wouldn't you just like to sneak across the border somewhere and, I want asylum. I know that they made her promise when she went to Switzerland she would not ask for asylum. The ambassador took her aside and said, please, make this promise that you won't do that in order for the visa. This is, a couple of trips ago, but I guess you're still on the honor system. And
Yeah. And that's why they trust me, because I come here and go back.
Okay. Yeah. How are things in Syria? Are they settling down a bit?
Yes, much better than before.
I remember you showed a little clip of people walking and enjoying outdoor activities and like we do here in a regular city.
Well, it's full from 7 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock in the evening. But once I had to sneak and go to Vevey, which is close to where I am. We went there just to buy some chocolate because Swiss chocolate is the best.
Yeah. So any questions? Anything you want to? So Ian, that's perfectly normal. He said once you do your exercises, you let it settle, and then you go and get into your life. But the whole part of the breathing and breathing in those active elements, it's designed to have that stuff settle within us. So, but I mean, what you should be noticing if you're starting to do this regularly, because you are harvesting attention and you are harvesting these higher molecules that you're breathing in from the air. Hopefully maybe a week is not enough, but you should notice an increase in your ability to be mindful, self-aware, to be self-remembering, remembering yourself throughout the day, because you are ingesting those higher molecules, particles, whatever they are. Do you notice that?
It's hard to say. I want to say yes, but I also don't want to just pretend to myself that I'm accomplishing something.
Okay.
But it does feel like the light inside is a little brighter. It's a little easier to see what's going on.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I'll keep it up. We'll see how it goes.
And comments are welcome. Even just through the message board or whatever. Anyone? Any other comments? Any other observations?
It's hard to see the reality. I understand that I want to be happy, but when I see my husband, HURT, it's causing me some kind of pain to see the reality.
Yeah, the pain is good. We should always be provoking experiences where we intentionally suffer and consciously labor. So it really depends. I mean, if you break your foot and you think, wow, pain is good, and you keep on walking on the brake, that's silly. If you have some kind of wound that needs to be healed and you need to get off it, you don't create that kind of suffering. But the more internal suffering we can create, the better. Happiness, Mr. Gurdjieff, someone once asked, can we be good? And it's a similar answer. Can we be happy? And he said, yes, but it is not the goal of a true man. That's man, not in quotation marks. A true adherent, a true seeker. We grow between positive and negative. We grow in the center. So we don't want to be good. We don't want to be bad. We don't want to be happy. We don't want to be sad. We want to move into that reconciling position right up the center. Now, has anyone thought about the decision exercise that we went through last week? Has anyone started to do something where they've set themselves some kind of a task, which involves a form of punishment, excuse me, if you don't do it?
I haven't done it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I haven't done it, but I've been doing the exercises, the one about inner peace and the holy affirming and the I am and the relaxing one.
Yeah.
I found out that, the more I went inside of me, the more I, brought up all the, all the things that have been in my subconscious, and I haven't dealt with them.
Okay.
But I found a way because I don't know why I told you that I felt that there was something in here, just about to burst into tears. And I found a way to deal with this when I wake up in the morning. Before I do anything, I do these exercises in the morning. Like they've been like prayers for me. I do them and start my day with them. And after a few hours, I do my sport. It's a, I do sport for around half an hour, 45 minutes, which keeps me the whole day relaxed and better. Probably because, I am releasing all the tension by doing both the meditation and breathing and also the sport.
Yeah.
So I feel much better, and I feel that, I used to feel the burden in me used to make me feel like a mountain holding a lot of burdens on me, incapable. But now I feel energized, and I feel it's easy for me now to stop certain things, or to control myself, or to deal with certain issues. Like I find myself, I'm able to separate things and watch them. So yeah, it's just great.
Okay. Mr. Gurdjieff says that without an aim, even if we end up somewhere really good, we can't claim to have taken ourselves there, to have taken the necessary steps. He says it's important for us to have an ideal, and there's actually a 4 ideals exercise I won't get in today, to have some kind of aim, to have a goal. It's important to have a far goal, so we have sort of an overriding goal, but to have an immediate aim, particularly something that we are going to do today, or a couple of things that we are going to do today. Part of this, the whole system to awaken, means to grow more real. It means to be more intentional, to live with intent. If things just happen, we can't claim that we intended for them to happen. And this is why having an aim, even a small aim, even if it's just, when I come to my door with my key, I'm going to hold my key in my left hand. Something as simple as that is an aim. And we shouldn't really set ourselves aims that are too undoable. They should be simple little things. So the decisions, in the collected state, to ask ourselves, what should I do? What task should I set myself? And then to punish the physical body if we don't do it. He says that, what we have to do is we have to oppose the physical body in all circumstances, in all occasions. It was designed by great nature to be the wholly denying force within ourselves. And so it's the opposition that's within ourselves. And so we can't let it win. So when he says, do what it, or like what it does not like, when he's talking about it, he's talking about the physical body, and the physical body needs training. So if you step upstairs with your right foot, you want to try and break that habit, make your walking upstairs something that is far more intentional. Link it to an aim. Keep the aim simple. So it's not like I want to walk with full awareness for a whole mile. It's, I want to, during the mile-long walk, I want to try and bring myself back to myself as often as possible. And I want to walk as much as I can in the collected state. That's a possibility. But, you want to set something up that where if you do not comply, that perhaps you hold your arms out, for Mr. Gurdjieff recommended for 7 minutes. He said that after a while, you'll begin to notice that it involves two centers. And the centers are the physical center and the emotional center. It's a very interesting exercise. He recommended to people to stand with the arms out, palms facing down, starting at 7 minutes. And then the next day you increase it to 8 minutes. The next day you increase it to 9 minutes. And it really starts, he talks about reverberations in the solar plexus in Life is Real, Only Then When I Am. And when I did this, I had major reverberations in my solar plexus. So to get a taste of that state. But, little goals, small goals with some kind of punishment. I'm going to open every door handle with my left hand. Or one that he recommended for people was to set a time to say at 11 o'clock, I am going to do X, Y, and Z. He has these exercises that he gave some of his students. He would say at 11 o'clock, I want you to rank your family in order. So first with your father, then with your mother, then with your eldest sibling, and then the next sibling. And, at noon or at 12 o'clock, you think of your father and you think the words, I am, thou art I. And you try to remember yourself and you try to represent them as fully as you can, to see them as completely as you can. And then you go to think of your mother, as long as they're living, and you represent her to yourself as fully as you can in your inner mind's eye. And then you think, I am thou art I, and then move through your family. It could be your parents and children if you have children, or your parents and siblings. And he said it doesn't matter where they are. This was just one of the exercises that he gave people to start bringing this degree of intention and intent and aim into our day so that we can be said to have done something. Excuse me, because he talks a lot about how we cannot do things just happen. When we set intent, that's the way we begin to exercise our ability to do, and we begin to grow our will. So just, baby steps, but it's important to, with me, what I've been doing is I've been doing that exercise. I thought I came across it again in G.I. Gurdjieff, Paris Meetings, 1943. And so I've been thinking of my eldest daughter, my son, my youngest daughter, and then my sister. And I've been thinking, I am thou art I, and representing them to myself. Because he does say that there's a special quality that comes with blood, that there's a telepathic nature that comes with kinship. And, perhaps it's the iron in our blood is magnetically charged in a very similar fashion to the iron in our parents' blood and our children's blood and our siblings' blood. So, for me, I just want to see what happens, see without changing anything on my part. And I know that they're not going to be watching this, or else I'll figure out what I'm doing. But I just want to see if I do that for a couple of weeks, will it change their interaction with me? Will they do different things? I have no idea. I'm doing it as an experiment, but just to see what's going on. And then for me, it's not really a deep punishment, but I've been taking the dog out in this hot weather. I got a spray bottle. I spray him down, but I've been going for like 2, 3, 4 mile walks. And so my punishment is just to walk an extra mile if I forget. So that's an extra 20 minutes walk, which the dog will love. And I don't really mind. I like walking. So just doing, a simple task like that to bring conscious intent into our day, sometime in our day. So we've got to actually stop and remember ourselves, to collect ourselves, to do whatever it is that we're going to do, and don't make it complex. And then if we forget, we do some kind of punishment that's aimed at the physical body. So he also recommended, going without a certain meal in a day, or not drinking your morning coffee, or if you're a smoker, not having a cigarette, different things for the physical body. So one of the, yeah, Ian.
If we, I'm a little tweaked about this. If we set something that we're going to do at a certain time, and then at that time something unexpected has happened or something has taken longer than we thought, but we do eventually, like we hold the aim through the disturbance, and we do it when we're off the phone call, or when we finish the conversation that somebody really needed to have with us, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Part of me thinks that that's good because you're carrying it through the resistance, but then also maybe I failed at it because it wasn't at the time, and I didn't handle my life well enough to make it happen at the time that I agreed upon.
Yeah. You want to set the aim, the goal, the decision, not to be too complex. That can be developed later on. This is just learning how to create an aim and exercise the will. And then, you want to set a punishment, but you don't want to, wear a hair shirt or get blood welts in your back because you're whipping yourself. You want to just, sort of a mild rebuke type punishment. And, a lot of times we don't have control over our day. We can't control when the phone rings and it's necessary to answer the phone. So you could actually say, as you're making the decision, you could factor that in. I'm going to remember myself, and I'm going to do this particular thing at 11 a.m. unless someone disturbs me. And then I'm going to do it as soon as I can remember afterwards. And so that would be factored into your decision, and it would be there. Or else you could say, no one, I don't know, your phone probably rings all the time, or, you've got to attend things all the time. But if you had a 9-to-5 job, you could make sure you don't do it when you're at work. Or else you could do it at work, and you could make sure that, there's that one person you don't like, that you smile extra hard when you see them, or something like that. And to begin to bring these tasks into your day.
Nice. Thank you. That helps.
Okay, Mr. Gurdjieff said that you can't study psychology without studying cosmology. And you can't study cosmology without studying psychology. He didn't use those exact words, but he said, the universe, we are a microcosm of the macrocosm, that old Hermetic phrase. He says it's not quite as simple as a lot of these people have made it out to be, because you have to understand the law of octaves and the problem that occurs at the mi note and at the C note, and how this can cause things to deflect. So you have to factor that in order to get a correspondence with above and with below. There's an ancient phrase that they attribute to the Greeks, but it's way older than the Greeks. It's, man, know thyself, and thou shalt know the gods in the universe. Most people only know the first part of that, which is know thyself. They don't realize that there's a second part, know thyself, and thou shalt know the gods and the universe. And they also don't recognize, because they don't really play and express the second part as much as they do the first part, they don't realize it's a formula. And it works equally, know the gods and the universe, and thou shalt know thyself. So when we study what goes on outside of ourselves, we study what goes on inside. Let me just bring something up, if I can. Okay, just give me. So this is the most basic representation of the way the universe functions. We started with one. We started with the absolute, the unknowable. This is, you know, the Hindus talk about this level of divinity, this level of God, as being 5 fingers more than anything we can imagine. We cannot describe the absolute. We cannot limit it with language. We can't really talk about it. But there's this absolute substratum that is the basis of all reality, basis of our existence. And within the one is the 3. And the 3, in a sense, are coeval with the one. And they're not really part of the created realm. So the 1 and 3, there's an eternal sense to them. And within the absolute, the 3 can be in a very undifferentiated form, or it can be in a differentiated form. And in the differentiated form, it leads to the creation of the universe. So the 1 and the 3 there's an eternal component of them. But from the 3 comes the 6. And then from the 6 comes the 12 and the 24 and the 48 and the 96. And so these numbers are not just plucked out of the air. These numbers all have meaning. They all have importance. And this collectively is known as the ray of creation. And this is our particular ray of creation. There are other rays of creations, other universes potentially, other things we don't even know about. But within our schema, within where we are, this is the way we are connected with the absolute. So you can see that the Earth is way down the list, and the moon is even lower. Now, each one of these levels is twice as intelligent, twice as refined as the level below. So, for instance, the Earth is twice as intelligent, twice as vibrant than the moon. And the Earth is half as intelligent and half as vibrant as all planets. So these represent orders of reality. They represent levels of reality. But it's not like the absolute is up there and then we are down and then, you know, we're just sort of like, you know, hanging from each other, because these are all interpenetrating each other. So there are molecules of the absolute right here and now, wherever we are. Molecules of all worlds, molecules of all suns. Everything interpenetrates each other. A metaphor that Mr. Gurdjieff used was that as wood can contain gas, and then you can soak the wood in water and it can soak up the water. So it's got wood, water, gas within it. You know, everything is here. Everything is contained within ourselves. These molecules, these particles of these different levels of reality are all contained within ourselves. Now, another important thing to understand about these levels of reality is that we're subject to laws. There's one law for the absolute, 3 laws for all worlds, 6 laws for all suns, 12 laws for our sun, so on down. And part of us is at the level of the moon, part of us is at the level of the Earth, part of us at the level of all planets. So we are subject to many laws. And another analogy, a metaphor that I've come up with is, imagine a 7-story building. And all the floors are completely empty. And on the top floor, there's 1 person. On the next floor, there's 3 people. On the next floor, there's 6 people. On the next floor, there's 12. All the way down to the last floor, there are 96 people. You can see how there's greater freedom to move about and to move quickly without any kind of interference with the 1 person in that room, as opposed to the 96 people in that room. Now, this is all related to awakening. So the lower levels are the denser levels, which are the most sleep-inducing levels. And in terms of humanity, the level of the moon and the level of the Earth are profound levels of sleep. And the mindful level is the next level up. It's the level of all planets. So that there's a direct correspondence to the ray of creation, to levels of consciousness, to levels of existence, to the laws that we are bound by. So on Earth, we are bound by 48 laws. This is a pretty dense, heavy, dark place in the universe. And if we could free ourselves just from half of those laws, we would be then world 24. And we would have much more inner freedom, much more external freedom. So there's a degree, so not only awakening, but there's a level of freedom, there's a level of breaking free from the laws. So to have this representation, to understand this is very important, because we are the microcosm of the macrocosm. So we have, from the absolute to all worlds, to all suns. So when you look up in the sky at night and you see all those stars, all of the stars are suns. That's that level of reality. Then the sun itself is hydrogen 12. It's at the level of 12 laws. Then we come to our planets. We come to the earth that we live on, and we come to the moon, which plays a very active role in human affairs. So looking at this, it doesn't really look to quite relate to ourselves. But when I do it differently, just give me a second. Let's see if I can move this. So when we look at this one, this is where we are. This is the same thing represented differently, and these are only representations. For instance, with the light blue, grow your being, the levels of being. 1 is the absolute, 3, the eternal unchanging, 6, the archangels, 12, the angels, 24, natural man, that's mindful man, 48, vertebrates, and that's sleeping man, and if you look across to the right, the state of waking sleep. 96 is the level of invertebrates, 92 plants, 364 minerals, 768 metals. We're actually composed of all of these things. So when I talked about a 7-story structure, I was specifically looking at the 7 worlds in the ray of creation. But the numbers, again, all line up 1, 3, 6, 12, 24, 48, 96. And if we go very much over to the right side, we can see the levels of man and the levels of consciousness. So at world 48, this is sleeping man, and the level of consciousness is waking sleep. At world 24, it's self-aware man or mindful man. And this is the level Mr. Gurdjieff called personally conscious. So it's the awareness of myself here in this moment. So all acts of mindfulness, which bring us back to here and now. And here and now is, where space and time meet within me is here and now. So any act where I bring my attention to here and now, such as being aware of the screen, for instance, with my eyes, or hearing the traffic sounds with my ears, or smelling with my nose, these are all acts of bringing my attention into this moment and becoming personally conscious about what is happening here. The next level above, the level of 12, here it's represented as angels. In the previous diagram, it was represented as the sun. So the sun is like an angelic being, we can speak perhaps. It's also the level of awakened man. So someone who has gone from sleeping man to mindful man to awakened man actually has lifted their being up to become on par and on level with the sun. So understanding what the sun is, understanding the energy that the sun transforms and everything gives us a little bit of insight into what the awakened man's level of being is. And this state of consciousness is what is called objective consciousness. Now, Mr. Gurdjieff said that, for instance, the level of being, the difference in the level of being, and I'm going to use the example on the screen, which is not the one that he used, the difference in level of being between a plant and an invertebrate. So a mosquito, something that doesn't have a skeletal system but can move around, a bug. The difference between a plant and an invertebrate, or the difference between two men, can be greater than the difference between a plant and an invertebrate, because humans can span 3 essence classes, 3 food classes. And this is all about growing our being. It's learning how to grow at higher and higher levels. So going back to what I said earlier, where Mr. Gurdjieff said after we do, certain kinds of inner work, and we enter in the collected state, we should try to stay collected for 10 to 15 minutes after the exercise finishes, to allow the emanations that we created, the particles that we created, to settle within us rather than be dispersed through our atmosphere out into the world. So we're talking about actual particles, actual growing our being. Now, if we come and look over at the diagram on the left, this is my rendition of the ancient diagram of all living things. Here in the ancient diagram, they just have vertebrates. They don't have slumbering man. Here at this level where I have mindful man, they have natural man. And then here where I have awake man, in that original diagram, they have angels. Otherwise, this is unchanged. And this shows us the nature of existence. It also shows us the purpose of life. And by this, I mean, any one of these squares over here. Let me just, can I magnify this? So any one of these squares over here represents a life form. The number on the left in the middle represents their essence category or their food category. The number in the top right represents what they are food for, and the number on the bottom right represents what they eat. Now, humans, we are these, fruit-eating apes that fell down out of the trees and ate roadkill, so to speak, and developed a taste for meat, and the environment changed and we came down from the trees and we learned how to hunt and various things. So we're all over the map. These are like sort of Platonic ideals. But everything in the universe is designed for the transformation of energies. And we understand this most especially in terms of the food that we eat. So the food that we eat is transformed into our body. It's transformed into the energy. We need to move our muscles to get through our day, to do whatever. And we eat more than food. I'll get into that in a minute. So this shows that we can rank, and ancients a long time ago did this. They developed this chart and they realized that there is a growth. So these levels represent laws. They represent levels of consciousness. They represent levels of vitality. So, going from the absolute, the earlier one, just, the ray of creation, all of those numbers and more are reflected in this diagram. And when those numbers are reflected, there is a correspondence between them. And now this reveals interesting things. So the slumbering man is food for the angels. In the original diagram, this was the angelic realm. But, slumbering men and an awake man, they have a special kind of relationship. There is something that slumbering people can give to awake people as a form of nourishment. And this is maybe why awake people take time to talk to slumbering people. I'm not sure. But it shows the interrelatedness and interconnectedness of everything and how it's all related to food. And food is really just the alchemical transformation. I'm going to move up to here. This diagram in the middle, again, notice the numbers, 1, 3, 6, 12, 24, 48. That was the original diagram, a part of the ray of creation that we belong to. But, these numbers do continue. And this diagram here represents man as he is born, natural man. I have to add a proviso in that we don't know many examples of natural men. Most of the people that we know are deformed, they're malformed, they've got wobbles, they've grown parts of themselves in incorrect ways. So this is like an ideal of a natural man. And you notice the word food, air, and impressions. We have three forms of food. The food that we eat, the physical food that we eat, the air that we breathe. We breathe in approximately 2 kilograms or a little over 4 pounds of air a day. It's our second being food. And also the impressions that we receive. Now, the thing about impressions is I'm in Catherine Hulme's notes with Gurdjieff, with Mr. Gurdjieff. She talks about an impression being something like 1/10,000th of a second. So impressions are feeding us all the time. For instance, and for a normal human being, we can feed directly on impressions. We do not have to transform impressions into a food that we can feed on. So this impressions do not need to be refined. A sound wave comes to our ear. The sound wave is an impression. And we've got these little hairs on our ears that then begin moving with the sound. And that sound is translated into an electrical impulse. We can also use the word transform. I was talking about this with a client yesterday. Down, if you held your arms down, I don't know, 30 degrees, open slightly, where your fingers would be pointing is two blind spots. We have these blind spots that our brain automatically fills in. Down, sort of, I guess you can't quite see where my hands are ending, but down. And you can go online and look for blind spots, and there are tests that you can do to prove that you have these blind spots. And the reason we have the blind spots is we've got 10 million photoreceptors in our eyes that are receiving the vibrations of light. And we know that light has different vibrations. The Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet. As you move up, the vibrations are more important, or not more important. They're higher. But where the photons go into the brain and they're turned into electrical signals, we've got a little nerve going in through our eyes, and that's why we have blind spots, because these photoreceptors need a way to get into the brain. And so there's one area where they all go through. But we don't see light. We're seeing the representation of the light as it's transformed into electrical energy in our brain. So all of our senses transform what we receive directly into electrical energy, which then feeds us. So we feed on food, air, and impressions. And this diagram, if we look at this is the octave, the very where my cursor is, this is the octave of food. We eat food. Food starts out as dough 768, and then it meets with something in our mouth, where the plus sign is up here at level 192. Mr. Gurdjieff called this carbon 192. Within us, the actual process is the food comes into our mouth and it meets with the saliva in our mouth, and then the higher blends with the lower to meet in the middle. So Ray 384 then goes into our stomach. It meets with carbon 96 already in our stomach in the form of the gastric juices. They blend together into me 192. I'm giving a very, very simple explanation, because some of the stuff is refined down and it's various other things are happening. This is just focusing on one very specific.
Ya, ¿qué pasó?
Pardon? So it goes into our stomach. It meets with the gastric juices. Me 192 then goes into our duodenum. And here, it wouldn't evolve any further if it wasn't for the octave of air coming into play. So then air enters us at Do 192. It gives the me 192 the sufficient energy that it needs to continue up, or the octave would end at me and it would begin to degenerate. So then it moves into our liver is Fa 96. So 48 is the cerebral hemispheres. Law 24 is our cerebellum. And then the highest energy naturally produced in the human body is in our reproductive organs, and that's C12. The octave of air comes in, we breathe it in. This is responsible for our emotions. This is why we don't have a lot of really high level emotions, because our emotional center is pretty stunted. It just comes up really basically until me 48, at which point it ends, because it doesn't have the necessary energy to move up to the next level. But within ourselves, we do have these carbons, these plus 48, plus 24, plus 12, that allow our emotions to evolve this way. Now, looking at this diagram here, where my cursor is, law 24 of the octave of food, this is a very, very important molecule. When I first set out doing this, I was in contact online with someone in the foundation, and they told me not to waste my time, because you've got to really, really learn these in many different ways. Law 24, just sense your hands. Sense the skin in your hand. Sense the bones. Sense the muscles in your hand. Sense your hands as fully as possible. And that sensation, that awareness of your hands is actually law 24. The product of law 24 is to be able to sense our body. And one of the problems with humanity is C12, the energy that's produced in our reproductive organs that Mr. Gurdjieff calls sexual energy, is siphoned away by our other centers, and this leads, so to speak, to a malignant growth within us, which he called the misuse of C12. And I mean, I'll get into that. I don't know if I'll get into that today, but I will get into that. But if you realize that law 24 requires C12, basically, right over here where my cursor is, the So 48 has to come into contact with something of the level of 12 in order to produce La 48. And La 48 is where we are lawfully using the energy in a proper way. So the more we can bring our awareness back to our physical body, back to the sensation of self, back to the awareness, of my feet, ankles, lower legs, knees, upper legs, hips and buttocks, my lower back, my lower torso, mid-torso, upper torso, my hands, wrists, lower arms, elbows, upper arms, shoulders, our neck, right up to the top of our head. The more we can do that, the more we're using this energy lawfully. But if you can't do it, if you just have lost the ability to sense yourself, it means that the higher energy that was necessary for that alchemical transformation has been all used up, and you have to accumulate it again. So again, going back to the first diagram where I talked about, the ray of creation, all of the numbers are here. These all exist at these levels. So we've got this level within ourselves at the level of 96, which is the level of the moon. This manifests particularly within ourselves when we experience the lucid emotions like road rage or anger or just complete despair and resignation. Our most mechanical, our most, destructive, emotions, homicidal rage, is a representation of the emotions in world 96. So for normal people who get in, road rage and they want to smash someone's window in, or they get in yelling and arguments and things like that. Some of the energy, some of what they're producing at that level, according to these teachings, helps to feed the moon. It's the energy that's required by the moon as part of the ray of creation and as the growing end of the ray of creation. Now I'm throwing a lot out that could be unpacked over hours. The next level up, this is the level of mindful awareness. But if we just focus on becoming mindful of our physical body, that just represents the octave of on the left, the octave of food. But we can develop the octave of air much higher, and we can develop the octave of impressions higher. So this is not the awake man, this is the mindful man. And the reason we can't do this, the reason a normal person is unable to do this with any kind of regularity, is because they lack the higher substances within themselves that are necessary for this alchemical transformation to occur. A very important one to help this process is So 12. So 12 of the octave of air, which represents emotions. The breathing exercise, to put yourself in a very relaxed state, to get yourself into a collected state. And then to use your head brain, body brain, and feeling brain to breathe in. And then to use your head brain, body brain, and feeling brain to breathe out. But breathing in your head brain, you represent the active elements of the air, that you're breathing them in. And that you're sensing in the body brain, you're sensing your lungs expanding. And if you can bring a little joy to your eyes and joy to your demeanor and feel a joyful emotion, you are invoking all three brains. And then when you breathe out, imagining something remains. As you breathe out, a gray fog, representing, the gray fog is the representing to your head brain. And what you are doing is you are working and bringing in, I don't know which carbons we're bringing in, but these plus white boxes that we need, these elements have to be present within us in order for the alchemical process to happen. So in order for us to experience some of the higher manifestations and to digest air and experience some of the higher emotions, we need something to already be present within ourselves. And so this is where the breathing exercise comes in. And it's also, when Mr. Gurdjieff says, don't rush off after you do certain important exercises and allow the emanations to settle. What we're doing is we're actually growing our being. We're growing our being at a higher level. So this is, on the left is sort of man without his being hasn't grown. This is the first step up. And this is a proper, fully three-balanced, three-brained first step up. This is actually a diagram of self-remembering as well. The first conscious shock is self-remembering. So we not only have the evolution or the development or the alchemical transformation of these molecules from the air we breathe, we're also in the process of refining our impressions as well. Mr. Gurdjieff defined one of the ways we can do this. He said that we double an impression if we become mindful at the moment of receiving it. So if you're aware that your your eyes right now are receiving this view, this totality of energy coming in, and you're aware of your eyes receiving the light vibrations that you are, or you're aware of your ear hearing the sound, you are doubling the impression, so to speak, which means you're taking the dough and you're really moving it up to the ray. You're doing the transformation of that energy. So to work with the breathing exercises, to bring those higher molecules, those higher particles within us, and to be more mindful in terms of what we see, hear, smell, taste. So I call those external perceptions. I call the very right octave external perceptions. This is the octave of breath and emotions, and this is the octave of internal sensations. So the difference between a sensation and impressions, receiving the external impressions from what we see, hear, smell, taste. So this is done in a fully balanced three-brained state. So this is the penultimate goal of being mindful, is to be mindful in all three brains. So to consciously look and listen and smell and possibly taste while sensing the body as one organic whole, while also breathing in or experiencing some kind of dollop or feeling of joy. To be mindful in all three brains, the head brain with our external perceptions, the body brain with our internal sensations, and the feeling brain with our feelings. To do it simultaneously is to do the first conscious shock. And again, you know, world one is the absolute. Three is the eternal unchanging. I also like to think of three as the level of the Godhead. God the Father, perhaps, God the Mother, and I'm a little heretical here, and God the Son, or the three forms of the divine. You know, the holy affirming, holy denying, holy reconciling. We can have one of those molecules at this level of personal consciousness within ourselves. That's at the level of three. That's actually not the holy denying. Three is the holy reconciling. Six is the holy denying. So we get a lot of six. You know, we can actually tap in just as we are now to the lowest levels of the Godhead. If we can produce Law 24, we are producing an energy that is on par with the holy denying, that is on par with all suns in the original diagram. Now this, the second conscious shock, this is awakened man. So you can see how the octave of food has been increased. The octave of air hasn't really increased, but the octave of impressions has increased. And you can see how they go up to the higher levels. So you can see that we actually grow our being, but in a much lighter, much more refined fashion. And so when Mr. Gurdjieff talks about growing our being, allowing emanations to settle within us, and he's not speaking metaphorically, I mean, the words we're using are just representations, but we are actually feeding our being, we are actually growing our being. And the awakened man, you know, at the top end of all of their octaves is the holy reconciling. You know, if you're an esoteric Christian, you would say that's the level of Jesus, that's the level of Christ. Hindus, that would be the level of Rajas as a divine quality. One would be Sattva, six would be Tamas, and three would be Rajas, but at the divine, most perfect expression of it. And you can find these representations and these similarities in other teachings and other understandings. So when we look at the state of objective consciousness, this is where the world becomes real, because we've removed a lot of our perceptual filters. You know, you walk into a room, you see chairs. Those chairs don't exist in the room. They exist in your mind. They are perceptual filters. In your mind, you project the meaning of chair onto those objects in the room and identify them as such. They're not really in the room. They're really in your mind. They're part of your mental projection. Just like this phrase at the top, the second conscious shock. This does not exist on the screen. On the screen right here are some lines and squiggles, and your brain is superimposing. It's projecting a meaning onto those squiggles that make them look like words that you think are on the screen, but those words really only exist in your mind. So a lot of what we see in the world are internal projections. And if we're not real inside, if our thoughts are not real, if we're always, thinking of fantasy and illusions and hallucinations, and, the biggest collective hallucination is that it is now my time, 11:34 a.m. on Sunday, July the 15th. Who said it's Sunday? Who said it's July? Who said it's the 15th? We have this collective hallucination that we take to be real, which isn't real. It's just a figment of human imagination, and it only exists in our minds. That's part of subjective reality. When we step up into the level of objective consciousness, we begin to separate the real from the unreal. We begin to see what really is here. My body is really here. This is why it's good to nurture the awareness of my body. There's a reality to my body. The objects that are around me in the room, the chairs are really here, but they are not chairs. They are objects. They're not even objects. That's a label. So this level is the level of the awakened human. So the center of gravity for the awakened human is at the level of 12, which is the level of the sun. They have access to a higher level. We're 3-story beings, so we have access to the level above and the level below. So an awakened person can have access to the holy denying, the lowest level of the Godhead, but the level of 24 is the level of essence, for instance. They also have access to essence. And this is why an awakened human being can act as like a petulant child at times. They still have that level that has an influence on them. And the level of essence isn't this perfect, wonderful, idealized level. It's J.G. Bennett said it's a very emotional level, but it's a reactive emotion. So this is, Bennett says that between 12 and 24 is where things polarize. So, love at world 12 has no opposite. So this is love of consciousness. This is when Mr. Gurdjieff, with his expressions, love, faith, and hope, when he talks about the level of consciousness, he's talking about 12. When he talks about, the level of feelings, he's talking about 24. But here love becomes love and hate, and so it can become really reactive. And, there's been a lot of things coming out now about how spiritual masters can't be spiritual masters because they get upset or various different things. A lot of that is actually hidden away from a lot of the devotees. They've got an inner circle of people who don't let them manifest in certain ways when they're in public, but they still feel those emotions. It still has some kind of sway in them. So, this sort of busts in a sense the myth that the awakened man is a representative of God, because that's level 1. He's not even at level 1. He's connected to the lower levels of the Godhead, but he's not at that level. So understanding these diagrams, this is the whole alchemical process. This is the whole level of awakening. And I don't want to go into it too much more now, but all of Mr. Gurdjieff's teachings, everything can be located on these diagrams. Now, some of these diagrams would need to be expanded. I've got a diagram that shows the misuse of C12. It's not on this one because I wanted to put everything on a single page. I don't want to go into that right now. I just wanted to give you an understanding of why cosmology and psychology are interrelated. And when we study ourselves, we are studying the universe. And when we study the universe, we are studying ourselves and understanding the levels and the orders of reality, understanding the nature of the ray of creation, understanding, the difference in orders of laws in terms of heaviness, in terms of density of these various molecules that are represented here at the top. We begin to see all these correspondences within ourselves. So, for instance, if we can experience So 24, which is, or not so 24, so 12, which is a very refined emotion. If we can actually manufacture that emotion within us so that we are centered in that level, and this is what's supposed to happen. If you look at the center diagram, it's what's supposed to happen in the octave of air. The octave of air in self-remembering even takes us just one little step above the other two octaves. But if we experience that emotion, it's a really refined emotion. It will give us some understanding of the sun, because that is the level of the sun. Are real heavy, the homicidal emotions that I was talking about earlier, the road rage, where people just lose it. It's not necessarily anger. It could be complete, absolute fear, where someone wets their pants. They're just so absolutely terrified. Or it could be just a complete despair, overwhelming. At that level, it's said that, humanity feeds the moon. And it's not that humanity feeds the moon, it's that most people feed the moon. And it's not that we really feed the moon, except we do feed the moon, because whenever we succumb to those emotions, we are actually releasing in our atmosphere. This is far from the collected state when you're in that kind of total terror, total anger, where you don't exist. It's just anger and terror. We can get a sense of the heaviness of the moon and what that level means. And then, the world 48, this is the world of our body. This is the world of our mechanical habits. So whenever you step up and you land on the first step with your right foot, or whenever you put your pants on and you put your right leg first, or whenever you reach for a door handle and turn it with the same hand, most likely your right hand, this is a manifestation of hydrogen 48. This is a manifestation of the energy of the earth and the ray of creation. It's it's how we can taste this energy within ourselves. So certain mechanical forms of behavior are world 48. The mindful level, and here, let me bring this back. Whoops. I wanted to do an inner exercise. I may not quite have time. Let me get through. So if you look at this middle diagram, you will notice that at the level of 24, at the level of mindfulness, there are three molecules: La 24, Fa 24, and Re 24. So in the proper three-brain state of self-remembering, we should be transforming these three molecules. La 24 is, so this is the all planets. This is the part of ourself that exists in the planetary realm of our solar system. So the level below the sun and above the earth, it's all planets in our solar system. So La 24, the use of this energy fueled the mindful awareness of my body, what Mr. Gurdjieff termed as sensation. So I can actually incorporate the inner work and doing an inner exercise talking through this. So the mindful awareness of my physical body. My body brain is located in my spine and the lower part of my cerebellum. But for instance, we can become aware of gravity. So the effect of gravity on our body, pulling us down, the pressure points, perhaps the bottom of our feet, underneath our buttocks, underneath us. We can sense gravity. We can also become aware of the sensation of balance. Our head is balanced on our neck, which is balanced on our shoulders, which is balanced on our spine, which is balanced on our pelvic bones. So any kind of sensation. This also includes, we can sense inside the stomach, we can sense the bladder, we can sense our colon, we can sense down our throat, various places within the body. This is all fueled by this planetary realm energy. And it's a very specific energy. So La 24 is not the same as Fa 24. This is what they don't understand, for instance, in the normal teaching of mindfulness. They don't talk about that there's different textures, different flavors to these energies. And Fa 24 is the same planetary level, but felt in the emotional realm. And then Ray 24 is the same energy felt in the head brain and fueling the head brain, fueling potentially our perception. So to consciously look, listen, smell, taste, to be aware of our sense organs receiving an impression at the moment they receive an impression. Or we can even take this one step further when we get more advanced, and we can, the Buddhists talk about this, becoming aware of your thoughts, like clouds floating by on the inside of your mind. So you are separate from your thoughts and you're mindful of your thoughts. That's fueled by a completely different fuel than the sensation of ourself. Now, there's the C12 is the highest thing that we naturally produce. And when we don't have the proper carbons and the things inside ourselves, and we don't do the proper work, the other centers, so the emotional center and the intellectual center, steal the C12 in various malignant ways that leads to sort of a negative growth within our being, and it leads to all sorts of wobbliness. And that's why I said the diagram over on the left, the waking sleep, represents sort of unsullied natural man. We've got so many bad habits and so many things that have taken shape in us that we have to work on to get into the state of being normal. This is why Mr. Gurdjieff talked about the obitel, that in order to enter the work, you actually have to enter on the level of the obitel, the householder. And he said that a lot of the aristocrats and intellectuals that existed, they had to do a lot of work to get themselves down or into the level of the obitel, sort of the unsullied, natural human being, in order to begin to work. But as we work, it's a growth in our being, and it's a movement upwards. So you can see from the left to the middle to the up. This is the journey of awakening. This is what we are hoping to do. We are hoping to grow our being. And all of these levels have correspondences outside ourselves. And all of these molecules, the higher molecules, the God molecule, the Trinity molecules, these all exist around us right now. This is something that Bennett goes into in quite great detail. He said that a lot of these higher particles are everywhere. They're around us. But we have not developed the apparatus. We haven't developed ourselves to the level where we can feed on them. But it gets to a point where we can actually feed on them, and our higher carbons, as you can see over in the right-hand side, come from higher levels. And this also shows, when, ancient esoteric Christianity said that humans are meant to be conduits between heaven and earth. It's, we're meant to grow our being, and when we're in the right, we do, the highest levels, the three metaphorically is represented as the Christos level, Jesus. So we become this conduit, this link for heaven, all the way down through all the elements in our body, down into the earth. And we bring higher energies through us. We become these transforming stations of these descending cascades of energy. And this is one of, as I understand it, the goals of the work, to serve great nature, to bring the highest energies we can down into creation, in a sense, to feed creation. And so this is what I believe is the purpose of the evolving end of humanity. They say humanity is the evolving end of great nature, and within humanity, there is an evolving end of humanity. And, it's all for a purpose. There's a meaning of what we're supposed to do. So by looking at these diagrams, by understanding these diagrams, by superimposing them on the work, And I'll do that later. I'll talk about that later, how everything that Mr. Gurdjieff talks about, from identification to internal considering to formatory thinking, negative emotions, all the ways that we can get broken and waste energy, it can all be mapped out and understood through these diagrams. There, I've, just I hope you're bringing yourself back to yourself and aware of your breath and aware of your body and being in this moment throughout the meeting. But I covered a lot of ground today. Mr. Gurdjieff, actually, if you go back to In Search of the Miraculous, he brings this stuff in very early because it's important to understand where we fit into the universe. Any questions?
I'm a little curious about all worlds, because I can kind of understand everything up to that, and I can kind of understand the absolute vaguely. But
well, I mean,
near world is a planet, so
yeah.
It seems like it's
well,
a misunderstanding.
Look up in the sky at night, and every point of light that you see represents all suns.
Mm-hmm.
And then all worlds are everything that you can see, including all those suns, including all of the space. That's the totality of this is the way I understand it, the totality of the universe. So there's the absolute, and then there's everything that's in existence, that's in creation. And then the next level is actually the points of light, the stars in that whole what's up there, and then it comes to our sun, and then it moves down. That's my way of understanding that. Whether or not it's correct,
Of course. Thank you.
I mean, this is noble work we're doing, important work that we're doing, by growing our being, by transforming. The higher the energy we transform, the higher the purpose we serve in the whole schema of creation. And it's also nice to know that there's a map that shows us where we go. This is just a representation. It's a map. It's not the reality, but it gives us, these understandings. So, when I'm aware of my body, that's the planetary realm. When we grow the Kesdjan body, when we grow the astral body, it's world 24, where we're growing ourselves at a higher, more refined level. The real I is world 12. The real I that we ultimately want to bring out and awaken and bring into the world as awakened beings is at the same level of the sun. So we can begin to understand these things. Any other questions?
So when you look at the sky at night, you see all suns.
Yes, that's the stars. This is my own. When I look at up there, I'm thinking of that I'm seeing all stars. But when my whole field of vision and all 14.5 billion years across of the universe, all worlds include all suns, everything up there, except it's at a slightly higher level. Maybe we can think of all worlds conceptually or theoretically as creation just, a millisecond after the Big Bang, when everything was hydrogen, and then as it began to cool and solidify and the stars appeared, and, maybe we can represent that level that way. I'm not sure. I'm not a cosmologist. And to be honest, the higher levels, they're interesting and it's all very informative, but in many ways it's beyond our level of reality, beyond where we are capable of really understanding at the moment. This is something Mr. Gurdjieff never really talked about. He never talked about the higher work, because the people that he was working with were Europeans, and he had to start with square one. So a lot of his teachings and a lot of the focus of his teachings are for the lower realms and how to correct it and how to bring things back into balance. I wasn't quite an answer, but any other questions? Bring yourself back to your breath, bring yourself back to your body. be aware that this sensation of self, this awareness of yourself, is fueled by law 24 of the octave of food. This ability to sense the air as it touches our face, this ability to be aware of the effect of gravity on our body, this ability to sense our spine, our hands and fingers, feet and toes, are all fueled by that energy. Now, the ability to be mindful of the screen in front of you, to be mindful of these images, to be aware of these images, is fueled by ray 24. It's a different molecule. It's the molecule of impressions, receiving things from the world. So if you can globally, see things, so rather than just simply focusing on something to the exclusion, but if you can see where your focal point, which is you'll hold your arm out and the top of your thumb is about your focal point, but if you can also, while you're aware of the screen, become aware of the peripheral of your vision, to become aware of receiving, all of these photons, these light molecules, these vibrations into your eyes, to become aware of what you're hearing, the sound of my voice, anything you can hear outside, the smell that you can smell, the taste in your mouth. These are fueled by ray 24 of the octave of impressions. So it's a different fuel than the law 24 that fuels your physical body, the sensation of your physical body. And these are different from the fa 24 of the octave of air or emotions. I realized years ago when I was taught to self-remember, the very last step, the way I described it to people, I don't know if he used these words, to me was, he said, consciously look, listen, smell, taste, become aware of your body, then become aware of your breathing, and then try to breathe in a tiny dollop of joy. So that dollop of joy, that emotion that we can breathe in, if we can get ourselves to smile with our eyes, smile with our mouth, if we can become mindfully aware of that slightly elevated delight, joyful emotion, that's fueled by Fa 24, which is different than La 24, which is the sensory awareness of our body. And this is different than Ray 24, which is the external impressions, and it's the level of our impressions. And so to realize that there are actually 3 different molecules involved in mindfulness, and to begin to differentiate the taste of one from the taste of another, from the smell of another, to begin to realize that these are 3 distinct alchemical processes fueled in distinct ways, and begin to differentiate them is something that's very important on this journey. And it should be part of regular mindfulness training. People should realize that we have these different possibilities, and to see where mindfulness itself fits in to the whole schema of energy and energy transformations. There I am talking again, and I wanted to ask you to ask questions. It's almost 12, so we're going to have to go soon. A lot of information. Fortunately, this is being recorded, so it'll be up there if you want to go through it and think about it. And these diagrams, I think I've shared them, and they're on the group on Facebook, right at the top of it. And to ponder these, to think about them. Everything that you do, every thought that you think, every feeling that you feel, every sensation can be located on these diagrams. The misuse of certain energies can be located. We can see the result of those misuse, the misuse particularly of C12, the sexual energy, the energy that's developed in our reproductive organs. That will probably be the topic of next week, where I will go into the misuse of C12 and how important that's the central understanding of a certain level of these teachings, is the misuse of that energy in our lives, and to begin to use it correctly. And as I've said a number of times, the simplest way to use that energy correctly is to sense your body, is to become aware of your body as one organic whole, to become aware of your body from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head, to become aware of the sensation of self. In this moment that we are sensing ourselves, we are using that one energy properly. At any rate, it's noon now. I'd like to thank you all for coming. And Michael said he had to leave half an hour early. I knew that, and I think we lost the connection with Iman. But I know both of them also watch this after I post it. So take care. Enjoy your day. It's a beautiful day here. So I'm going to enjoy it. And
Thank you, Alan.
okay, take care now. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.